Well, again, a very warm welcome to everyone to this autumn coffee break among LESLA colleagues. My name is Annemarie Nieuwenhout, and I'm here for the technical support today, together with my colleague Ines Filimban. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Suzie. So during the pandemic, we started these online coffee breaks, and we use the Swedish word fika, which means a moment to slow down and appreciate the good things in life, such as to have coffee with friends. We are very excited that we have Véronique Fortier and Suzie Beaulieu together with us today, and we will give the word to them in a moment. But before we start, a few technical points. Ines and I will be facilitating this meeting today and taking notes. If you have any technical problems, you can reach us through the chat directly. For all other questions to Véronique and Suzie, you can also use the chat. And if you're more comfortable using French, that's fine. There are more bilingual people here today. Moi aussi, je parle un peu français, donc si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas de les poser en français, c'est optionnel aussi. I just said, if you are more comfortable in French, don't hesitate to ask them in French, because Suzie and Véronique are perfectly bilingual. To you now, Ines, I think.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well, wherever you are in the world. Let us know in the chat where you are joining us from. So for me, I'm in Newcastle at the moment. It's a bit near sunset, so in a few minutes. So just write us in the chat where you're joining us from. Wow, okay, so we have some people from USA, Salt Lake City, and Canada. Yeah. So this is the first time we have some guests from Canada. That's wonderful. Doing the talk as well. We had people from Australia, Europe, and from the US. So wonderful. All right. So thanks all for joining us. Of course, you all know that LESLA is here. We're all here sharing the same interests in LESLA. Some of you are practitioners, teachers, innovators, researchers. So also let us know what you would like us, for example, to share with you. If you have any LESLA updates, please let us know so we can, you know, it's always very nice to know what is going on in LESLA. So this is the platform that we can share all of our expertise and our work. So there you go. Yes. Anything to add, Anna-Marie?
No, I think we can start. Véronique and Suzie, again, a big thank you for joining us today. I am very curious to find out more about your research, so please tell us more. And if you have any questions in the audience, don't hesitate to ask them.
Yes. Thank you, Anna-Marie. Thank you, Ines. Thank you, everyone. We were very happy to be invited to the LESLA coffee break and to be sharing this was our very first experience doing classroom-based research with LESLA learners. So this is what we'll be sharing with you today. And I'm not very good. I'm in charge of the PowerPoint, but I'm not very good with Zoom. So if you have questions in the chat, or if I don't see your hand risen, please interrupt
Just
me
interrupt.
in question. So this is how we divided our talk. I will be briefly presenting our context, and I will be telling you about the approach that we've chosen to test or to experiment with. And then I will share, and then Véronique will take over and present some observations from our classroom-based study, and we'll discuss all together afterwards. So as you know, Canada has 2 official languages, and French is one of them. And French is spoken by about 22% of the whole population. And the French people who have French as a first language are located in this province here in the east, the province of Quebec. And this is where Véronique and I work and live. And in this context, LESLA learners, they have to learn French because French is the sole official language of the province of Quebec. So in 2018, we started working with an adult education center who had seen its number of LESLA learners grow exponentially. From, as you can see, in 2009, they only had about 50 LESLA learners. Then it tripled in 1 year. And since 2014, they receive yearly about 400 LESLA learners. This center is located in Quebec City. And in my case, a lot of the students I teach in the education program, they get hired in that education center. And they told us, well, your students are not quite ready to teach with LESLA learners. So I said, of course, because I didn't even know they existed. So we started partnering with this center so that we could get expertise and so that we could train our BA students to be part of that community. In that center, they've received 3 waves of immigrants in the last year. So the first wave, of LESLA learners came from Southeast Asia, Nepal, Burma, Vietnam. And then there was a second wave with the Syrians. And more recently, the LESLA learners we receive are mostly from Central Africa, Rwanda, Burundi, these countries. And then in 2018, we got funding from a funding agency in Canada so that we could go in the classroom and work with the teacher and start building our expertise with LESLA learners of French. So we had 2 main objectives with that research. The first one was to adapt with the LESLA teacher and an approach we knew had potential or could have potential with LESLA learners. It's input-based tasks. We'll tell you more in a couple of slides about these tasks. And we wanted to adapt it, implement it, and then determine whether it would be a good addition to LESLA pedagogy afterwards. So why we chose TBLT, so task-based language teaching, as potential because we have little information about how LESLA learners who are multilingual, how they managed to achieve expertise in an additional language outside a formal context, so in their daily lives. And so from Moore and from Petit and Theron, we saw that the ways in which they learn an additional language is through experiential learning, and they learn chunks of languages. They have mentors and they observe more competent peers, and they have real communicative intentions, and they try out and they get feedback from their mentor and they go back and try it again. So we saw that this is how they normally learn outside the classroom. And when we thought about it, we said, oh, this has a lot in common with TBLT as Long proposed it. And so we said, well, maybe TBLT has potential for LESLA learners. Let's try it out. Within TBLT, you have tasks that involve more production, and there are tasks that do not involve production, that are input based. And in these tasks, the learners are exposed to some kind of input, and they have to demonstrate that they've processed the input by displaying their understanding. So they don't need to speak. And typically these tasks are listen and do tasks, and we'll show you examples in a couple of slides so that it becomes more concrete. In listen and do tasks, there's no production required. So those learners who are still learning French, they would not be disadvantaged. There's no reliance on print, so there's no need to read or process written words. These tasks can be achieved without school-based strategies, and these tasks do not need, or the language does not need to be explicitly treated as an object, which we like to do typically in French, in a French classroom. So input-based tasks allowed us to move away from the traditional teaching that we typically see in French classrooms. And so we thought this has potential for our LESLA learners. So how does it work? The students are grouped in groups of 2, 3s, or 4s, and they receive an envelope with the photos of the items that are targeted by the teacher. Then the students place the photos in front of them, and then the teachers issues a command, says, show me something, show me, I don't know, casserole. Then the student talk together and identify the photo and show it to the teacher, who says, oui, if they get it right, or no, if they get it wrong. And then if they get it wrong, they have to communicate together to find the appropriate photo until they get it right. So it's very, very simple. And so this is, yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what we did. We were in this classroom where there was 13 LESLA learners. Most of them were multilingual learners, and they were from all over, from all the places I showed you at the beginning. The people from Syria, the 4 students from Syria had attended school for less than 6 years before they moved to Quebec City. And 2 of them, 2 of the students from Africa, they could communicate with ease in French already. And, sorry. So we tried out 2 different tasks, and it targeted household items. It was a teacher who wanted to target these items, and it targeted the singular and plural markings, as well as prepositions. We were there for a period of 5 weeks. So we went every other day in the classroom, and we were there for 20 to 80 minutes each time. And we recorded the whole class, and we recorded the groups as they were carrying out the task. So I'll show you what the tasks look like. The first one, it was really for the learners to map the oral form of the target words to its meaning. So the teacher was provided with a handout with all the words that corresponded to the photos, so that she didn't have to remember all the words that she had already said. And for her, as you see here, it was important for her to expose her learners not only to standard French, but other variants also that they could be exposed to. So it looked like that. They had pictures like that in front of them. And then if the teacher said cuillère, they had to pick the right one and show it to her. And then there was task 1 could be also a little bit more complicated, where we added the plural of the same words. And as you can see in French, the noun is pronounced the same. We don't pronounce the S. So une télécommande, des télécommandes, you have to process the determiner in order to get the right picture. Because the word in itself, the noun in itself, the pronunciation doesn't change. Un coussin, des coussins. So you have to process the article, or the students had to process the article in order to choose the right photo. Un oreiller, des oreillers. So this was the first task. The second task required the students to work with the same words, but this time to locate them in one of the rooms in the house. So this time they were given 5 large photos with the rooms in the house, and they had to listen to the command, place le verre dans la salle de bain, and they would show it to the teacher. Similarly, and then it got a little bit more complicated in task 2, where they had to place one object in relation to another object. If the tasks are, if the approach is clear to you and the tasks are clear to you, I will then leave Véronique to let you know about how it went in the classroom. You're on mute.
Microphone. Merci, Suzie. So as she was telling you, we went during we went many times in the classroom and we were going, the teacher was deciding when she thought that her students understood or mastered the items before moving on to the next more complex task. So just for you to see how it went in the classroom, we're going to show you a little video. So in the middle, I'm pointing. In the middle, you can see the teacher and the students are around them.
Un évier, non? Non. Non. Un évier, non.
Ah, un évier.
Non.
Madame.
Non.
Merci, madame.
Madame, aidez. Non. Oh. Dans la cuisine. Oui, dans la cuisine.
Madame,
Un évier. Non. Ah, je fais la vaisselle dans l'évier. Oui.
un évier.
Un évier.
La C.
Dans la salle de bain.
C.
Un évier. Un évier. Un évier, un évier. Ouais. Regardez bien un évier.
As the sound was very loud, but as you could see, so the teacher, she was saying un évier, and at the beginning, no one knew what it was. So they were, and she was like, okay, try something. So they kind of tried some things and then started asking questions, and she gave a context, un évier, je fais la vaisselle dans l'évier, I'm doing dishes in the sink. And then they started, and once one team gets the right photo, then they kind of look at each other and then they get the right photo. And then she goes to another item. And she could do that a few times before she kind of knew or saw that the students were reacting quickly and getting the right answer. So what we saw is an example of task 1. So it was only form meaning mapping of the lexical items. There was no singular, plural, prepositions or anything. And then it was going more complex as the weeks went by. And our we wanted to try a new approach and see in a way if the approach would work with LESLA students, because we're from a second language acquisition background, and all those great teaching approaches that have been tested with adults in universities or children. We don't know if we can just use it with LESLA learners. That's kind of the reflection that we had. And in previous studies, most of the time what they use is pre-test, post-test design and they measure the competence before and after, and that's how they see if the approach works. So that's what they did with children. Shintani, she worked with a beginning learner of English in Japan, were 6-year-old children. Erlamin Ellis worked with adolescent beginners of French in New Zealand. And they measured the development of the gains in receptive and productive vocabulary and grammatical knowledge. And what they observed is that although there was no language production required during the task, when they measured the gains after, the students did gain productive knowledge too. So it was kind of interesting, but that's one way to see if the task works. There's other ways that we can use them. Shintani also used in her study, she was not only looking at the product, like the gains, but she was also looking at the process, so what was going on during the task. She analyzed other directed speech and self-directed speech, and that's what we thought would be probably more a better choice for us to work with LESLA students, because we know that doing formal test is something that's not always easy and not always conclusive. So we decided to look at what they were doing during the task, and to do so during this, when we were doing the study, we had iPads on the desk of the students, so we could also see more directly and more with a more close-up what they were doing. So our objective was to see, because what is learning? Learning is making form meaning connections. So connecting a form, in this case, it was only oral form, to its meaning. So when we looked at the videos and we analyzed the data, we were looking for instances of form meaning connections. And so we're going to show you an excerpt here, and then I'm going to explain how we coded it, how we analyzed it. Hopefully the sound is.
Les bols sont dans la cuisine. Les bols sont dans la cuisine. Les bols sont dans la cuisine. Très bien. Les bols sont dans la cuisine. Les bols sont dans la cuisine. Ici, c'est le bol. Les bols. Oui, les bols, des bols, c'est la même chose. Excellent.
So what we saw in this excerpt that we just watched, there were clear instances of form meaning connections, and how it was analyzed through other or self-directed speech. Other directed speech, for example, was when the student asked a clarification either to the teacher or to other students. And in this case, the teacher said des bols, so plural. And as Suzie was saying, the noun itself doesn't change. Bol is the same in singular plural. It's the article in front that changes. So the student showed an image of a single bowl when it was supposed to be plural. So the teacher said, no, des bols. And then the student explicitly said, oh, des bols, two, like 2 bowls is plural. So it was an explicit verbal manifestation that she made the connection between des being plural and more than 1 bowl on the picture. Other coding that we did, we also looked at, because a lot of time the students were free to use any language they wanted, although the task was all, the input was all in French. So there was more than 1 speaker of the same language. So there was few Arabic speaking students. And sometimes we could see, although we didn't translate and we don't speak Arabic, when they did use another language than French, but then explicitly using it to do the task, like they were speaking Arabic, but then pointing images, then we also consider that as a manifestation of form meaning connection being conducted. So we analyzed, we had lots of video recordings. We analyzed it to see how what was the ways in which the students made form meaning connection through self-directed speech and other directed speech. Self-directed speech, there was 2 coding categories. So overt form meaning connection, like what we said, des bols, deux bols, or self-repetition in French. Because a lot of them, when the teacher was issuing the command, they were kind of repeating des bols, des bols, des bols, looking at the pictures, like trying to find the right picture. And that self-repetition in French was what the most observed in all tasks. And there was a lot of other directed speech observed too. So clarification requests, like we saw in the video too, guidance provided in French. So they also helped each other in French. Okay, no, it's not des bols, c'est un bol singulier, that kind of thing. They were explaining each other. And L2 use with a peer, but not any L2 use, just well, it should be L1. L1 used with a peer. It was used when when it was explicitly directed to helping doing the task. So there was a lot of instances. The task didn't require any production, but they did use a lot of language to try to make the form meaning connection, help each other, ask questions, and that kind of thing. So it was really, really rich in data to observe. And then, so our goal was to see what they were doing during the task, because it was our way of being able to answer the question, is it a viable approach for LESLA learners? And from what we observed, it was. But the teacher, she also kind of wanted to see, well, would they learn anything? And for her, for them to be able to learn anything was for them to be able to produce the right forms after the intervention. So we kind of did that. We did a post-test activity where the students themselves had to go in front of the class and issue the commands for their colleagues. And that's so when we didn't use that as a pre or post test because it has its limit, but we can see what the students got from the intervention.
Non. Oui, 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 oui.
C'est bon. Des mouchoirs. Des mouchoirs. Mouchoirs. Madame, des mouchoirs ou un mouchoir? Oui. Ou les mouchoirs?
Un mouchoir, des mouchoirs.
Oui, d'habitude, on dit pluriel parce qu'il y en a beaucoup dans la barre. Donc, des mouchoirs. Ouais. Les. Les? Oui, oui, oui. C'est bon? Oui, c'est bon. Le couteau. Des couteaux? La couteau.
La couteau, c'est.
Oui, oui.
Merci, Néné.
Bon.
Quatre.
On fait 4? Oui.
Oui.
Tout le monde a fait?
Oui, oui.
Oh! Merci beaucoup, tout le monde.
It's really cute. Yeah, it was a lot of fun in class doing the tasks. What interesting points in that that video is that the student in front, when she was saying des couteaux, and the students were not sure they understood, then they asked themselves, un couteau or des couteaux, because they knew they had to focus on the article to be able to identify the right picture if there was only one or more than one knives. And what's really interesting is that the last word she says, lit, is bed. And there was no picture where there was more than one bed. So if she said bed, no one asked un lit, des lits, because there was no need for them to process the article to be able to get the photo of the bed. So that's when it's a great manifestation of the fact that the students will focus and treat what's needed to do the task and to understand the message. So it's really interesting because the teacher always kind of focuses on the fact that they need to put articles all the time and conjugate correctly. But at the same time, when there's so much to process, it's normal in this learning journey to process the information that's really useful first and then process the other information. So that's kind of although we didn't treat these data as pre-post test, there was very interesting observations we could get from it. So then working with the teacher she was a really amazing teacher, really open to learning, talking, improving, reflecting. But when we first presented her the approach, the input-based approach, she wasn't quite sure about our thing, because we were like, well, I'm not going to be teaching. Because for her, she had to teach explicitly that they need an article or more, this article, this plural, this article is singular and stuff. And we said, no, you don't have to. They're going to learn by doing the task. So she wasn't really sure. But then while doing the task, she was really amazed by your students' engagement doing them. She said, I've never seen them that engaged in tasks. And we went many times doing the same thing over and over again. Well, the difficulty level always increased a little bit, but it was still the same task. And the students kept being engaged until the very end. So she was really amazed with that reaction from her students. And what she also mentioned is that she saw that the students were interacting a lot with each other, helping each other, and also her weaker students that sometimes she says, well, they don't say much, they don't seem to understand much. They were engaged and they were able to help their colleagues too. So that was something she had not observed a lot before. There was challenges that she mentioned with managing the task. It's a lot of materials, little envelopes and pictures, and then you change the pictures and stuff. So we, like the researchers and student research assistants, were in class dealing with the whole thing. So she said, if I'm alone, it might be difficult. But they found a way to organize the photos so they can do it too. And then after we experimented this approach with her, it was implemented in all the center, in all level 1 and 2 groups. So they made more copies and like sets of photos, and everyone in the center is still using it now with the first levels. So that's really interesting, because when we do research, we want to be like helping, giving something back. With this study, we saw that there was, people are still using it and appreciating it. So it's really good. And then, but the teacher also said, well, that's kind of not too hard to do with like a concept. Concrete objects like a fork or 2 forks is easy to take a picture of and it's easy to treat. But she had problem teaching things more abstract like temporality, before, after, with the markers, verbal markers and stuff. So she asked us if maybe we could think about something with this approach to teach something more abstract. So we did develop all the materials to teach temporality, where we had pictures of a mom and a dad, or mom and dad with their kid doing different like everyday tasks with the kid, putting a kid to sleep, feeding the baby, dressing the baby and stuff. So we did develop the whole thing. We're not going to present it today, but in the next issue of task journal, the paper is accepted and it's going to be published. So if you want to know more about what we did to teach temporality, abstract concept with past, future, and present tenses, the paper is going to be out soon. Also, Suzie is writing in the chat. So all the materials that we used, that we developed, the photos and all, we've all put it on IRIS database. So it's a database where you find tests and materials used in research. So it's all, everyone can go and use the materials that you can find on IRIS. And yeah, so we were quite happy with what we observed with the input-based task, because what we saw is that all students, no matter their literacy skills or their skills in French, they could use the strategies that they needed to do the task. So though some students that could read and write, well, they were writing down words and stuff and taking notes, which is fine if it helped them. But the ones that didn't have that capacity, then they could still do the task using other strategies, helping each other and stuff. So one of the reasons why we think it's appropriate for LESLA classes is that anyone no matter their background, can carry the task with success. And that was one of the things that we wanted to see. So that's it for the presentation. We have our email addresses, and we're going to be here for the next like 20 minutes or so we can discuss questions, comments. Thank you.
Maybe
I
I
saw
stop
comments in
sharing.
the chat during the discussion, the presentation, but they didn't quite get to respond. Or
Thank you so much, Suzie and Véronique, un grand merci. So we're open to questions. If you like, you can turn on your video and your camera. You can also just use the chat. I think.
en français, in English, any language?
Ou les deux.
Ou les deux.
I see Julia has a question. Julia is asking if we receive a digital copy of the presentation. Yes, Julia, we will send it to you, and we will also publish it on our website. Thank you. Ah, there you are.
And maybe we can, Suzie, maybe we can also put the link for the iris in the presentation, so you can, find it
I'll do
easily.
that.
Yeah.
I'll do that while we wait for questions.
If no one has a question, I have one. I was wondering if this this approach with the input-based tasks, is it similar to total physical response? It reminded me a lot of that. Or is it what is the difference with TPR?
We often have that comment, huh, Véronique?
Right.
I'm not entirely familiar with TPR. From what I know, TPR is more about actions, and it's about verbs. Whereas input-based tasks, it targets, often it targets both lexical content and grammatical content, not only action verbs, but it has in common with TPR that you don't need to produce an answer. You either show, in our case, you show something, in TPR you do the action. So it has that in common, but I think the objective with input-based tasks is a little bit more, there's more content of both lexical and grammatical.
Thanks.
I don't know. You agree?
It's a wider
Everybody?
range of possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah.
The response is showing a photo, right? No matter what's on the photo.
May I make a comment? I'm wondering if the TPR, the total physical response, is more teaching before simply asking the question. So for TPR, we're doing an action, hand on head, hand on nose. So it's modeling first, and then students are learning the preposition and the parts of, or the parts of the body or whatever. And I didn't see as much of the modeling first in what you were presenting. It was more we know. Yeah. So, they had to just figure it out themselves. Could that be the difference?
Yeah, also.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's
And there is no modeling, as the task is it's the feedback. The teaching is with the feedback that the teachers give them. Yes, no, yes, no. And then they trial, error, and they get the feedback, and that's how they learn. And that's why the teacher at the beginning, she said, well, I'm not going to be teaching. Because she was just be given feedback. But
in the TPR, there's so much feedback because the students then are giving feedback to one another.
Yeah.
Because the students are seeing who remembers and who doesn't, and they're giving one another the feedback.
Yeah. Plus they
Yeah.
have the modeling from the teacher first, which they don't have in
Right, but then the teacher stops and then provides the input,
Yeah.
you know, put your hand on your head or whatever. So, okay, well, thank you. I am glad that that question came up because I was thinking a lot about that too. And which one is more efficient, because both allow students to have a multisensory experience and have a kinesthetic experience. And our goal is always efficiency when we're teaching our learners. And I don't know the answer to that. Would anyone know that?
I couldn't tell if there was more that would be more efficient than the other.
Yes, that would be an interesting thing to look at, wouldn't it?
Research question to be explored.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, and one of the reasons why we chose input-based tasks is that it's kind of it models the way that they, according to research, what we've read, they learn in real life, trial and error. You get feedback, and then you repeat, and then you observe the other ones. So those kind of behaviors are the ones that we saw during the input-based task that kind of resemble the way they would learn in real life. Oh, so Suzie put in the chat the link to the database. So that could be added to with the presentation, the link can be added to for people
Thank you
to be
very much. Yeah, that's very useful. We'll add that as well to the recording.
Yeah.
Great. All right, any more questions? Teresa says, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, Teresa says in the chat, it's great to see these focus on oral language. Yeah, that's one of the things too, because what we see in the classrooms is that there's always written support, there's writing all the time. And for some students, it doesn't help if they can't read the written language. So that's one of the reasons too why we thought input-based was interesting, because it was all oral. And then once they master the oral forms, they can map them to written forms if needed.
Yeah, and I can see that you also are giving immediate feedback, which is very useful, which they want. Yeah. Interesting.
Julia mentions that it gave her ideas. I don't know if you can share. I'm curious to find out what the ideas you got from this one.
Sure. Sorry, my throat's a little off, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning, or 8:45. It started at 8 o'clock in the morning here in Salt Lake, and I had to take kids to school. So not really ready for an international platform, but yeah, so I really liked the idea of because we just use a lot of pictures in emergent readers, right, in classrooms. And so, but showing a picture of something that would be used within the context of the target vocabulary would help to extend that activity a little bit more for those, kind of differentiate the learning, where we have some kids, or students, sorry, kids. I teach kids and adults, so some adults in the classroom who are, really know it and might be too repetitive and simple for them. Then I can extend it a little bit with adding more context items within that context. Whereas, and then the students who are still learning that the more target vocabulary can stick, to that, and that's fine. And then, I loved the interaction in the class, and I feel like we get a lot of that in our class, which is great. And I'm fairly new to adults. My children has been more of my focus. So it's just, and this is my first LESLA coffee break. So that was just my main takeaway, that yeah, was to kind of extend those target language vocabulary pictures and add more context to that, and adding more vocabulary for those learners who are already ready for moving on and stuff. So
Thank you. We're experimenting more with pictures now. We're carrying out a new project. It's totally different, but to get our teachers to rely less on print, or to rely less on finding the syllables and focusing just on code, we told them, why don't you use photos as prompts for either to get vocabulary or to start writing freely. And then one of the teachers brought pictures from her own family and showed all the relationships between all the members. And then she asked her students, can you bring photos of your own family? And they did. And she said, I covered so much, like sister-in-law, father-in-law, nephew, cousin, so many relationships that I couldn't do it before. Like she felt like they couldn't handle that many items, but with the photos, she said, I'm amazed at how much they knew and how much I could add on to what they already knew. So I think there's a lot. It's yeah, photos are great, and I know it's expensive for teachers. We got funding so we could do the materials for the teachers, but they did find money so that everyone in the levels 1 and 2 could also access photos. So yeah, thanks.
Oh, anyone else wanting to leave a reaction, or maybe you have some questions? Please feel free to turn on your microphone. Oh, I see. Monica she was disconnected. She's coming back now. I have one more question for you, Véronique and Suzie. So we saw this wonderful example of how you can practice with a very narrow context, how you can train the ears if it's singular or plural. I really loved it, and also how much fun it was. And I think it's a great approach. And I was also thinking, how do you position this particular activity in a full curriculum? Because with LESLA learners, there is so much to learn. You know, there's a lot of words, of course, but also you want to learn how to do everyday conversations, the everyday reading in your daily life, some technical skills for reading and writing. So how do you see the rest? It's a big question, I know. Any ideas on that?
Well, vas-y, Suzie.
I think the teacher, she was at the beginning, because it was one of the objectives in the homemade program that they used. It was to be able to discuss with the landlord's troubles in the household and things like that. So I think this was the beginning of her sequence. So to make sure that all the students had the vocabulary items to carry out the task, and then from that, she could add on the written form of the words that were useful to know how to be written. And then she also could carry out more role plays and oral skills based on that. I think this was the beginning of her sequence, if I remember correctly. And I think it makes sense to me that that would be where you would use input-based tasks.
So it's the starting.
I don't know if you want to add
to working to the solution of an everyday problem.
Yeah,
it's immediate. Yeah, something
That's why because they have there is no framework, like big program in Quebec. So everyone works with their own things. And in this center, they have those thematics for each session. And for that session, it was a household. So that's why the teacher targeted those kind of those lexical items that she wanted to work. But once the students are used to doing it, because at the beginning it takes just for them to know exactly what's expected from them, it takes a little time. And then, but once they're used to do it, it can be 20 minutes in a day, and then you do it 3 times a week. And it does, there's lots of lexical items that can be learned, and then grammatical information that can be inferred too. So it doesn't take that much time if you do it little by little. And I think the gains are important. And I think and just the fact of doing it, and made the teacher reflect on, oh, do I really need to have written forms all the time? How do I engage my students more? How do I get my students to work with each other a little more? So all those, it's like effets collatéraux. How would you say that? Those collateral effects of of the test that count.
Secondaire, mais positif.
Oui, c'est ça.
What you said was perfect. C'est la même chose. May I add one more thing? So it is a challenge to always find the photos. And one of the things that we've worked on in the Pathway to Literacy project is developing theme-based photo banks. And I know that took us hours and hours and hours. And so would it be appropriate if I add the link so that to the website? And then I think it could, I would recommend when you look at the website to the left, there are all sorts of items to choose from. There are stories related to the photos or to the themes, but the photos I think might be helpful for this approach, because then you're not recollecting everything. So, okay, now that I know it's appropriate, I'll put it into the link. Thank you.
Teachers spend so much time trying to look for photos everywhere. And when we started the project, at first we're like, oh, we're going to find photos. And it was so complicated. We hired a photographer and we took them ourselves because we had the funding, right?
Well, and we took some of these, we took ourselves. You know, I walked around the neighborhood and I took pictures near the school. And but others we found, all of the photos that are included are photos that are from Pexels or Unsplash, or from different websites where they are free domain. Do you call it free domain? Where there's no copyright on them, so that they would be appropriate to be using. Okay, thank you. I'm excited to share that.
Yes, so helpful.
Good. Well, I hope you find it helpful.
Elsie.
Yes,
To say
I
something.
also would like to share images too. I would like to share Eye on Literacy. And can I put that, is that possible? Can I put that link in? So Eye on Literacy has created books that are all wordless picture books for adults.
Oh.
And they're, yes, in many, many themes.
Oh, yes, please.
That's one thing that's difficult. Everyone has works, develops materials, but no, it's hard to find a place to share and for people to know where to look.
That's great. Elsie.
LESLA does have quite a good resource bank too. If we go to the LESLA under resources.
Yeah. Wow, great.
One thing that I noticed when you're working with images and pictures is that you tend to select sometimes, and talking from my personal experience, things that you have the nicest images of. Like, I see a lot of LESLA teachers in the Netherlands, and they go over and over the fruits and vegetables because they can bring them to the LESLA classroom. But, you know, people don't really need that. That's not the first thing they need. They know you know, they can share, they can buy their oranges also
Without
without
knowing.
languages or without any language at all. So I always find it so difficult how to bring those two things together, what people need most and what we can find good material, visual materials for. You know, there are some sentences, for example, that are super useful, but we cannot really visualize that. How do you see this?
Yeah, there's no picture of the
Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe next year we'll be able to answer Anne-Marie, because we collected a lot of sentences that native speakers of French in Quebec use to carry out daily actions. And then we got funding to try and go and work with a LESLA teacher to see how we can use that materials. I have no idea. So, but yeah, we'll find out. Maybe I'm sure we'll find something, a way to use it. But for now, I don't know. But the idea of repetition and connecting it to a situation, I think, will be useful. To be continued.
Yes,
Yep.
you're doing very exciting work. Thank you so much for sharing it today. It's wonderful. Ines,
No, just yeah, great work. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Oh, thank you for having us.
oh, it's a pleasure. If you are listening to this coffee break and maybe you think, hey, maybe I can present something too, please send us an email. Or maybe you know, have colleagues who are doing an exciting LESLA project, because we have these coffee breaks like 3 times a year, and it's exactly what we did today. We share resources, we share experiences, and we try to connect theory of research and practice. That's what this is all about. So please feel free to contact us, even when you think, yeah, but my project was really small. Don't be shy, and it's all about inspiring each other and bringing and taking something from this coffee break. Personally, I will tell the LESLA teachers that I am training about your approach, and I will do that next month when I see them again. So thank you so much for that. Are there any other questions from people? I see it's almost, we have been here for almost an hour. I wanted to say it's almost 5 o'clock, but that's only true for me and Jonneke. We were here for an hour. Maybe we can wrap this up then. What do you think, Ines? Véronique and Suzie?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for questions and comments. It was really rich.
Thank you too. It was lovely. I hope we'll see you again at our next coffee break. And Wednesday, my colleague Jonneke and I will send you the presentation and the recording, and also the links from the chat we'll keep. Well, thank you so much. A big thank you to Véronique and Suzie.
Thanks to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
See you soon. Take care.
Thank you very much. That was really wonderful and interesting. I will catch it properly in full when I can listen without and concentrate. I'll maybe stop recording.
Mm.